Okay, everyone. Thanks for hanging on for a second here. This is our latest edition of Shy Hack Night Remote. We're glad that you can join us. I'm broadcasting live here from my room here in Lakeview. Hosting with myself is Ryan Spencer and Josh Kavlov. I'm Cameron So, board member here at Shy Hack Night, and I'm excited y'all can join us for our first speaker presentation for our remote Shy Hack Nights. We're really excited to have Nikhil presenting from the Art Institute, and you can see he's on the call here as well. We're really excited to learn more about their new public API, and I look forward to learning more about that. As you might have seen in the screen while you were waiting to see me troubleshoot getting started, you can join us on our Slack channel, and feel free to visit shyhacknight.org to see the agenda for tonight. In our Shy Hack Night remote channel, there's threads going on for folks to introduce themselves, to socialize. And then later tonight, we'll do our normal breakout groups. But we're happy you can join us. Just a few points of context here. In a few moments, I'm gonna turn it over to Nikhil. But before that, I wanna remind you that we'll be taking questions today through the YouTube channel. We ask that you please be respectful and considerate in posing your questions. We'll wait to take questions after the presentation. We'll be looking through our chat, our YouTube chat, to make sure that we answer your questions. We encourage you to check out our code of conduct if you're not already familiar. It will be strictly enforced here in the digital space. But we look forward to the questions that you have. And we want to also let you know that in a moment, I'm going to press record. We are going to be recording tonight's presentation. And so we'll post it on YouTube here in a few days. I am going to turn it over to, without much further ado, turn it over to Nikhil and say welcome, and thanks, Nikhil, for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Cameron, and thanks to everyone else at Shy Hack Night for figuring this new way of doing Shy Hack Night out. I'm really excited to be here. I hope everyone who's joining today, that you all and the people you're close to are healthy and safe, and have found ways to find quiet space and rest amongst everything that's happening in the world today. Again, I'm really excited. I know there's a few of my colleagues on the call too. I'm not just representing myself or work that I have done by myself at the Art Institute. We have a whole engineering team and a whole experience design department that's been critical in moving this project forward within our department and across the organization as well. It's been a real cross-departmental effort. We've got a pre-recorded presentation that Cameron will kick off. I just want to say hello and welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll get started.
Hey everyone, I'm Nikhil Trivedi, the Director of Engineering at the Art Institute of Chicago, and I'm really excited to be in this space to share with you all today. Shy Hack Night is a respected institution among many of my colleagues, and is one of the places we've been most excited to share our work with. Before I begin, I want to recognize that the Art Institute of Chicago is situated on what is recognized today as the traditional homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. Chicago has the third largest urban Native American population in the country, with over 100 tribal nations represented. I wouldn't be here sharing with you all today if it wasn't for the legacy of Indigenous people in Chicago. So I want to acknowledge those who have stewarded this land and waters for generations and continue to fight for just present and future. I'm here today to share with you all a project that's been near and dear to the engineering team at the Art Institute, our public API. When I've talked about our API in the past, I've usually talked about the wild ride it's been developing such an open, transparent application within a 140-year-old institution. But as of today, the Art Institute is in our 7th week of the museum being completely closed to the public. So the wild ride of developing a public API just doesn't seem accurate in this moment of COVID-19. Nonetheless, I want you all to know that we haven't officially launched our API yet. But with all the uncertainty in the world today, I see so many of my peers hungry to create things that bring more joy into the world. And my hope is that our API can bring a little bit of joy into each of your lives. Today, I'll share with you the strategy behind our API, what we provide, and some of the cool things that have been built so far. As an organization, we publish a lot of content to the public. Artworks, catalogs, publications, shop products, events, mobile tours, microsites, articles, press releases, and on and on and on and on. Many of these are distributed through their own software stacks managed by distinct groups across the museum. A collections management system to manage information on our artworks, a digital asset management system to manage media of the collection, CRMs, e-commerce systems, website CMSs, library systems. It doesn't make sense to try to create a single system to serve the needs that each of these systems fill. But it does make sense to unify the publishing process across each of these platforms. While building our latest website that launched about 1.5 years ago, we recognized that we wanted to use information that already existed in about 8 different systems. At that point, we could have written a bunch of custom code in our website to integrate with each of these systems. Since a partnering design and development firm did all the initial work, that would have meant that we would have paid them to write 8 custom integrations that likely couldn't be used anywhere else. I knew it wouldn't have been long before our mobile apps would need the same functionality, and we'd have to write custom integrations with at least some of these same systems. Follow that with in-gallery apps, our sales and ticketing site, and other amazing apps we have yet to write. We eventually would have had a convoluted mess spearheaded by our website project. I still cry a little just at the thought of it. Instead, we built a data hub that acts as an intermediary, aggregating data from all these systems. It handles all these integrations so each consuming system doesn't have to. Instead, each public-facing system like our website and mobile apps only has to figure out how to talk to one thing, and they can get everything they need. If they figure out how to get artwork data, then because the API is completely uniform, they already know how to get shop products, events, exhibitions, artists, and so forth. It continues to save a ton of developer time among our staff and with partner agencies whose jobs we're making a lot easier. Digging into the details a bit here, within this architecture, we wanted to make the integrations with each system easy and sustainable. Source systems might get swapped out with newer, shinier ones, and we want to make the work of switching as easy as possible. To manage this, we wrote small little microservices that sit in front of each source system. They collect and query data and provide it to the central aggregator in a predictable way. Each of our source systems provide us data in different ways, so these microservices are where the integration complexities lie. Some have their own APIs that are easy to work with. Others, we had to rely on periodic CSV exports. And for some, we even had to write scripts that scrape web pages within the applications. Please don't tell anyone. Regardless of how it happens, with these microservices in place, each system the central hub talks to provides its data in a uniform way. So the data hub import process becomes much easier and less complex. The benefit of this approach was demonstrated when we recently changed where we get our collections data from. We used to get all our collections metadata from our digital asset management system, which if you're familiar with the nature of these types of systems, you'll know this doesn't really make any sense. It meant data had to go from our collections management system through a number of layers in our digital asset management system to the data hub before it finally found its way to our website. This process could take more than 24 hours. So last year, our collections dev team decided to provide its own API to simplify their systems. We gave them the specifications of how we built each of our microservices. They built their API, and then we changed our microservice to pivot to their new API, leaving the structure of the data that we provide ultimately to the website and mobile apps further downstream completely intact. We made a fundamental change to an internal system, and our website and mobile apps barely blinked. What used to take more than a day now took about 5 minutes. Internal staff were ecstatic, and our collections dev team was excited to deliver such transformative results. The Data Hub also provides search services across all the data that it collects, so you can search globally or across any number of resources you specify. The search is backed by Elasticsearch, and our service acts as a proxy to their interface. Elasticsearch's documentation is really rich, so it's a useful reference for our search. Now on to what we're actually providing. For an organization like ours, it's a lot. Metadata on over 100,000 artworks from our collection is available in the API, including relationships with other resources like artists, terms, and exhibitions. We have information on every exhibition we've hosted in our 140-year history, 1,000 products from our shop. Why shop products? Why not shop products? We didn't see any harm in including them, and we're kind of curious to see what'll happen. We have information on 20 years worth of microsites that we archived as part of this project with relationships to artworks, artists, and exhibitions. Blog articles going back 10 years, full publication texts. We're providing data that's never been available before and cross-system relationships that have never existed. All of that having been said, we've been able to do some pretty cool things with our API so far. We programmatically analyzed every image in our collection to determine their dominant color and released the search by color on our website last year. In the fall, we launched a browser extension to the Chrome Web Store that, when installed, shows you a randomly selected public domain artwork from our collection each time you open up a new tab. And we've also made available a command line script that displays artworks in your terminal window using only text characters. Our public API is one of a few different ways that we're enacting transparency and openness online at the Art Institute of Chicago. I'll quickly highlight the 3 main categories that we think about. First, open images. We currently offer over 50,000 images on our website for download under a public domain CC0 license, and the number's growing. Open source. Most of the code our engineers develop is available to the public on GitHub, including all the Data Hub code, our mobile apps, and in-gallery interactives. I feel like it's unusual for organizations to open source entire applications. Most of what I've seen from large organizations are tools and components, but we've open sourced our entire iOS and Android mobile apps, including their CMSs, our entire JourneyMaker app, which is an in-gallery interactive that lets visitors playfully create their own tours through our galleries. And we're working towards open sourcing our whole website later this year. And finally, what I'm here to talk with you all today about, open data. Later this year, we'll formally make our Data Hub API open to the public. There's no registration required, and there's a good amount of documentation that we've generated, orienting you to what's available. And remember, this isn't just an Artworks API. This is an API of all of our museum's public data. So if you figure out how to parse through our artworks, you already know how to get to our exhibitions, artists, events, articles, shop products, publications, and so much more. I don't think I can put to words how excited we are to give you all a sneak peek of this project. I've personally been at the Art Institute for 14 years, And I came to the museum as someone who didn't grow up with a fondness of museums and never really expected to see myself in them. I'm hoping our public API could act as a surprising door of entry to folks who might have similar experiences and provide opportunities for collaborations with folks outside the museum that we may not have expected. Like the person who built a Twitter bot that tweets a randomly selected artwork from our collection every 6 hours. You can find them on Twitter at AICBot. Or someone else who recently reached out to us about an app that she built where you can text a phone number to get a randomly selected artwork from our collection. If you're feeling a little bit brave, you could try it out at 773-249-6838. As you can see, the engineering team at the Art Institute works hella hard, and we have a whole lot of fun at the same time. We're really excited to share this work with you and to hear what you might build with it. Thank you so much.
So as we're waiting for questions, I see the first one, but I wanted to start and ask Nikhil, what were some of the biggest challenges of the project management side of this process? It's a very large organization. You pointed to some of the challenges in the video, but can you elaborate on some of the challenges you faced in creating this API?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that we were in a really fortunate position because I've been at the museum for 14 years, like I said, but I was in a department that specifically built software for internal staff. About a year before we began the website project with a partner agency, our experience design department hired me and Ilya Moskovin as well to sort of act as the developers who would take over the website once it was done. But we came on board a year before the website project even began. And so we had an empty plate. We came into that website project with like 40 hours a week looking for something to do. So time being our most precious commodity, like it was really fortunate that we had a year to just work on this thing without having to navigate other ongoing incoming things that many of us are navigating day to day. That having been said, like the biggest challenge, I mean, time is probably the biggest challenge for most projects, but the biggest challenge for us, I think, was just kind of selling the idea to folks around the museum. We've never had a public API before. We've never had a project like this that consolidated so much information and made it easy to access. And a lot of folks don't know what an API is and don't really know what can be done with it and what'll happen with it. So two things really contributed to turning hearts over to the project. One was the fact that I've been there for so long and I've built trust with people, right? To a certain degree, like I think people knew me and trusted that I would make reasonable choices around the data of the organization and around this project. So having invested a number of years, specifically building relationships with people outside of my department, pinging people for random coffees every now and then, just to kind of get to know people outside of the small circle of people that my work has me facing with. Building trust with folks across the organization certainly helped in selling the idea of the project internally.
You mentioned that sometimes folks don't know what an API is. One of the things I did appreciate and notice on the Art Institute page for the API was a link to what is an API, which I found helpful. Thank you for answering my question, but we are starting to get questions from the chat, which I'll share with you now. So we did have one question, which I'll propose we circle back to, but I'll read it now, which is Dan Basil asks if he can open the site and give us a short tour. But maybe we'll save that, if it's okay with you, maybe we'll save that for the end and see some of the other questions first.
Yeah, sure.
And then, so we have one question, which is, will there be a cap on the number of requests we can make on the API initially?
Yeah, there will be a cap. I think it's 60 requests per minute or something that factors down to that ratio. So the API is wide open. We're not requiring registration because we don't really want to put up barriers to people beginning to tinker with the API. So in place of registration, we do have throttling in place. And as the API grows and as more people are using it, if that needs to be reconsidered, you know, we're here and we're available to chat about. But today, that's what's in place.
Okay. The next question is, what is your favorite piece of art in the museum?
Oh man, I hate that question. There's so many. That was like, we have 300,000 works of art in the museum, right? There's so many amazing things to choose from, and so many things that have sort of come through over the years that I've been there. What's one, like my favorite piece of the day, at least before the museum closed? I mean, honestly, the thing that my mind is going to right now is a series of really large scale pieces done by a South Asian artist named Nilima Sheikh, where she made these like 17, 18 foot tall pieces that were all the same size, but there were a number of them. And they sort of told a story from a really bright green, nature-filled, lush environment to like an industrialized one over the series of like these 15 or 20 pieces. And they're all in such huge scale and their detail was really pretty. Yeah, that's the piece that comes to mind. And we had an exhibition of her work maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And we have a piece or two, at least, of hers in our collection from that series.
Awesome.
I think, you know, the desire to be outside right now is what what brings my mind to that series of pieces.
Thank you for sharing. I'll ask the next question here. Do you plan to do a Hackfest? Is next question.
It's certainly been a part of conversations of like what, as an organization, we could do to support getting the word out about the API and the growth of people using it. We don't have anything on the books right now. Everything that was on the books has been canceled. But it is something that's part of the conversations we're having. And we can reach out to you all if and when we decide to pull in together.
We're always happy to host breakout groups for those who want to maybe start a project using this API. So we're excited to host anyone who would be interested in doing so. I'll ask the next question, which is, what did the institution see as the value of making those products open source? Was that a hard sell? Were they apathetic?
You know, it wasn't a huge struggle to make it open source because we're an organization for the public, right? So as an organization, we're simply just a place that holds a lot of things that makes them available to the public. Historically, those things have been works of art. In terms of what the world looks like today, data is just another thing that we hold that should be available to the public. Source code is just another thing that we hold that should be made available to the public. So it wasn't like we didn't have to make huge arguments to do it. I think it aligned well with our mission from the start. The head of my department from the onset of a few of our major projects, he was on board with open sourcing as much as we could. So he communicated with folks that it's part of our department's mission to open source as much as we can. And when we've worked with partner agencies, that's kind of been built into the scope of the project. So our website, for example, we partnered with an agency, Area 17, based out of Brooklyn. They built our website using a tool that they had used on a series of previous projects. It's a PHP CMS tool called Twill. One of the fundamentals for our engagement with them was that we needed our whole website to be open source. So therefore, we needed them to open source Twill. So before before our website launched and before our engagement with them ended, they open sourced Twill. So it's been like a fundamental part of the work that our department has done over the past 4 or 5 years.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, are you working with other area art museums to include their art and data?
You know, it's been quite a big undertaking just focusing on ours. But having been said, there are a few projects out there that are working to aggregate data from a number of museums. Developers at museums talk to each other quite a bit. We all kind of know each other. So the American Art Collaborative is one of those places. They're working on aggregating museum data on their collections into one place and sort of creating a linked database, a linked open data database. That's sort of new territory for me. So I don't know if database is the right word to use there, but their intention is to create a linked open data set of museum data from a number of different museums. And there's a few other projects out there as well that are pulling in data. So they're on our radar. Our effort right now, though, has been solely focused on our museum. I don't think that we would take on the work of pulling in data from other museums into our API. I don't know if that's something that one institution should own. So I think what we would do would be to reach out to the collaborations that are already happening and try to move our data into some of those spaces.
All right. The next question, is there an early developer program to test it out?
No. I mean, you know, we're working towards plugging some of the final pieces that we feel like we need to have in place before a formal launch. And our team can be reached at engineering@arctic.edu. That email is on the open access section of our website, so that's not a secret. But we are available and accessible. That email reaches me and fellow engineers directly. So we don't have a formal program. I'd be curious from folks what they'd be looking for in a program like that, and maybe we can find ways to fill those needs. But we haven't put a formal program together at this point.
Okay. The next question is, how did you decide on using one microservice per data source application? Was that part of the design plan from the beginning, or did you experiment with any other design possibilities?
So we spent a good amount of time researching architectures. So we looked at data lakes, data hubs, and a few other patterns that organizations are using to do similar things to us. We landed on the data hub architecture because of the nature of the data that we were pulling in. It was mostly discrete databases. We did want to keep some semblance of this schema that was present in each source system in the data hub itself. So because of what we're trying to do with it, and the nature of the data itself, we decided to move with the data hub architecture. Why we decided to put microservices in front of each one, that partly had to do with like where developer resources existed. Because me and my colleague Ilya had the data hub all in all took about 11 months. Because we had 11 months of our own time to invest towards the effort, and we were well aware of the fact that a lot of people in nonprofits work multiple jobs and wear multiple hats at the same time, technology people included, we wanted to be able to build something that didn't put other folks in the organization in situations where they needed to invest their own time to get this thing moving. So the data services were something that we ourselves could do. They were small, discrete applications that only required us as developers to understand how to pull data out of a system and what the most efficient way to do that at this moment in time is. So yeah, because of where developer resources lied and the nature of the data that we were pulling from and what we were trying to do with it is why we landed on the architecture that we did.
Okay. The next question is, are y'all hiring?
So yes, we are. We're hiring for a .NET developer to take over our sales and ticketing website, which is a site that has been built and maintained by an outside vendor for a number of years. Hiring at the moment has all been put on hold. So once we move past this period of time in our world's history, I expect that we'll be opening hiring back up again. But today, I'm really bummed to say that we're not hiring, but we will be. We will be soon.
Okay.
We're also hiring for a product. We will be hiring for a product manager for the website project as well, once the freeze melts.
Okay. So just checking in. We want to field about 2 more questions if that's good. And,
sure. Yeah.
We can. Okay. And just for folks who are tuning in, if you have an outstanding question, please do send it through the chat. The next question is, why does the Art Institute see it as valuable to have data on their collection available online? Sounds like some of that is mission oriented. It would be cool to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I was at the Art Institute when we didn't really have any of our collection online. Starting in 2009 or so, maybe 2008, 2009, there was a big initiative to photograph our whole collection, because at that time it wasn't really common to like take digital photographs of your collection, right? We have stacks and stacks of slide photography and old black and white film, and a lot of that has been digitized. But at that moment in time, we had a database of our metadata, but not much digital imagery of our collection. So the intention at that point in time was, let's get as much of our collection as we can online in a rich, usable way. Since then, there have been a series of initiatives to photograph more stuff, to vet more of the data that's in our database, to make it available to the public. And today we have a good number of our over 100,000 works available in the Data Hub out of our 300,000 work collection. So, I mean, that's reflective of 10 or 11 years of diligent work, getting all this data out there. And yes, making as much of our collection available online is certainly ties closely with our mission. We're, like I said, we're an organization of things that we hold that are meant for public consumption. Opening up our physical doors is one way that people can access our collection, but particularly today when our doors are closed, our website and being able to view as much information as you can about our collection and the various things that we do across our organization online is more critical than ever.
All right. Thank you for sharing. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I wanted to check in to see if we did have that question at top about touring us around. I didn't know if that was something that if that was something that you were interested in or what that would look like, but I'll pose that to you.
Yeah, I can do a screen share and do a quick tour. How do I do this? Here we go.
Whoa.
Can you see my window?
I can, clearly.
So this is the API homepage, and this is linked from the URL that was in the presentation, which is arctic.edu/open-access. And I call that URL specifically because it talks about our API as well as images and open source code if you're interested in that other stuff. This is just the data part of that slide. So here you'll be pointed to some of our documentation. We've got a list of all the endpoints that are available in the API and what parameters can be set to it, with some examples of, here's an example call and here's the result that you might expect from that call. So these are endpoints, and we've got a pretty rich list of everything that we've included in our API. We also include documentation on all the fields that will get returned in a query. So for each endpoint, you can see the name of the field, what type of data to expect from it, and a brief description of what that field means to us. So again, for each endpoint we have in our API, from collections to the infamous shop, as I keep bringing it up to, from scholarly catalogs to content from a website itself. Every field that's available in the API is all outlined and documented here. So if you have any questions about something that's returned in an API result, you can just come back here and hopefully get some more insight into what it is we're trying to provide you there. We also have our Swagger documentation. So this documentation gets regenerated every time we do a production deploy of code to the API. So this documentation will always represent the most up-to-date code that you're accessing through the API itself. To access the API itself, we can take a look at one example query. This is our generic artworks endpoint. So this is just a listing of all the artworks. You can page through results, and every listing endpoint like this, we sort it by the last updated date of any record. So what you're seeing is the most recent record that's been updated in our collections database, followed by the next most recent. So this listing will always kind of be updated as people in the organization are updating records and publishing them. You can get to a specific artwork by just entering in the ID in this URL. So API/v1/artwork/ the ID of the artist. Artwork, in this case, is Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. And this is everything that we publish on that particular artwork. And you can also search. So we're just looking at the artworks endpoint, but everything I'm showing you here is true for every endpoint in the API. So if we search, let's look at some example searches in my history. Let's not look at some example searches in my history. I do a lot of tinkering and testing with the API, so some of this might not actually lead to anything useful. Let's look for artist titles match Sarad. Bob wasn't quite ready to do this, but this is our search endpoint. And when you pass a query for search, you'll be returned back with a much slimmer version of what our listing and the detail endpoints that I just shared with you. Basically just the score for the search, and for our purposes, we intended to return back the most minimal information that you would need to present search results on a web page. So a title, a low quality image placeholder, and information on an image itself if you wanted to display an image in search results, along with an ID and things like that.
Something for the pointillism fans there.
Yeah, right. I'm going to try one other search query. No, I should just stop while I'm ahead. So that's the, so those are the main components of our API. The documentation, listing endpoints, individual record endpoints, and search.
All right. Thank you so much for touring us around. I don't see any more questions in the chat. We just want to say thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation, and we're honored to be able to host you and the Art Institute. What timing for to share this out? So with a lot of folks at home, hopefully it will be an opportunity to explore the Art Institute's collections in a new way. And thank you for answering our questions. If folks are interested in reviewing this presentation, we'll be posting the video live, the video recording on YouTube in the coming days. Normally we would clap and say thank you and bring you your mug, but we'll have to give you your mug at another time. Just want to say thanks again. And to the folks who are watching, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience too. Remote is new for us as we transition things to be able to do presentations like this. And so really appreciate it. And thank you for your questions. So we're gonna go ahead and sign off here. For folks who wanna stick around for breakout groups, you can find that information from our shyhacknight.org webpage, and we'll be in our Slack channel there. But I am going to say, go forth and hack, and then I'm gonna end the live stream now. So thank you, everyone. All right, bye.